We all love a good story. A good story excites us and inspires us. A good story consumes our minds to the point that it's all we want to think about. It's all we want to talk about. A good story transports us into another reality, sometimes foreign and sometimes familiar, and allows us to experience something beyond our own lives. We grow up being told stories, and so from a pretty young age, we know what a good story sounds like and what it looks like. Sure, what each of us finds to be a good story changes from person to person, but we all know a good story when we discover it. What not all of us know, however, is good storytelling. When we look at storytelling, we're looking at how a story is told and why it's told that way. It's pretty easy to get through your whole life without ever going into this, and that is totally cool. But unlocking an understanding of storytelling adds an entirely new dimension to the whole thing that makes it so much more fun. Storytelling is a beautiful, complex, fascinating thing, and on this show, I want to share what made me fall in love with my favourite stories. I want to explore how their storytelling functions and why I think it had an effect on me. So, what better place to start than with the movie that opened the door? Hi, my name is Bailey, and this is why I love Lumos Maxima. Lumos Maxima. Lumos Maxima. Oh shit. Don't be telling nobody about that, alright? I don't know what that was and I am so sorry. So, where should I start with this thing? Oh, I know. This here is a picture of me at Christmas in 2002. Like a lot of you, I was a manic Potterhead. I had toys, I had backpacks, I had stickers, I had snacks, I had the whole lot. I had the books too. Could I even read back then? I don't think so. I was Potter mad, and this marked an interesting time for me as I was transitioning out of an obsessive dinosaur phase and into the world of fantasy stories. I was less interested in these stories of what was real and more interested in the stories of what wasn't. Those first two Harry Potter movies offered just that. These were two wildly fantastical stories about kids doing incredible things. I actually still use Harry Potter as a scale for life achievements. I mean, the dude fought a basilisk at age 12, and the most exciting thing I've done at 22 is not piss myself while being in the same room as Jennifer Lawrence. Go me. Anyway, Philosopher's Stone, none of that Sorcerer's Stone trash talk around here thanks, and the Chamber of Secrets are absolutely thrilling adolescent adventures that are warm, fuzzy, and just a little bit scary. They're pure escapism that takes you out of this world and into an exciting, absorbing, involving new one. They're just good stories. But The Prisoner of Azkaban? That's something else entirely. This was darker, denser, and drastically more mature than what came before, so much so in fact that my parents refused to let me see it in cinemas. As you can imagine, that made me all the more obsessed with it, and once I finally got around to seeing it a good year later, it became my favourite movie ever. If you were to ask me back then why I loved it, I don't know, I'd have rehashed the entire story for you and just tallied everything that happens that I loved. The night bus, the train sequence, the Dementors, the Hippogriff, the Quidditch game, the werewolf, the time turner, all that stuff. It was just generally awesome, and the fact that it had that dark edginess to it made preteen me all over it. It had that feeling of, oh, shouldn't be watching this, and at 9 years old, that thrill is the equivalent of Coke. Woo! That's just an expression, guys. I have no idea what that's like. The thing is, I wouldn't realise until much later that it wasn't so much the story that made me fall in love with The Prisoner of Azkaban, but the storytelling. And that's where we can start to get into some of that juicy analysis. Let's start with the storyteller, Alfonso Cuarón. If you've never heard of this guy, first of all, ouch, but after hanging out with me for long enough, you'll be outright sending ritualistic offerings to him as a god of cinema. This guy is the actual best. But let's just dial it back a bit for now. Both The Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets were directed by Chris Columbus, who, as it turns out, is a different Chris Columbus to the one that discovered America in the 1400s. This was the dude who had previously done the first two Home Alone movies and Mrs. Doubtfire, so knowing that, you can kind of see his sentimental charm all over his Harry Potter efforts. He was making these fun adventure movies for kids, and at the time, that approach was right for those stories. Come the third film, however, Columbus decided it was time to bail out so that he could spend more time with his own kids, thus ditching his contracted 7-film agreement to direct the entire franchise for Warner Brothers. Sad as that may have seemed at the time, it opened the door for new talent to take on the darkest Harry Potter stories so far. A few names were thrown around, including Guillermo del Toro, who passed on it because the series trend had been too bright and happy and full of light. If only he knew how dark it was going to get. Eventually, the studio settled on Cuarón, a Mexican filmmaker who hadn't read the books or seen the movies, and whose previous film was a sexed-up road trip story about 2 teenagers hooking up with an older chick. The logical choice, right?
Place your right hand on my waist.
What?
Don't even think about it. Bringing on Cuarón was a gigantic risk for a studio dealing with $1 billion franchise, and herein lies the first stroke of Azkaban's brilliance. The fact that we have a Harry Potter movie directed by the guy who would later go on to do Children of Men and Gravity is a gift. You see, Cuarón doesn't play like a studio director. He operates about 50 levels above that, and the results here speak for themselves. Cuarón looked at this series and thought, you know what, let's make it more real and more magical. How does he do that?
Lo que yo quería y me interesaba mucho era anclar la realidad humana primero para después ir al mundo mágico, porque mi teoría era que mientras más anclada es la realidad y la realidad emocional,
más mágico puede...
Más mágico iba a ser lo otro, sin tener que estar creando magia con efectos especiales.
Surprise, surprise, that shit worked. Of course, Steve Klove's A-grade script got the whole thing started with countless fantastic choices, but it's Cuarón that focuses in on the details of reality and translates them to the screen. I want you to take a look at this short scene just here. Cuarón plays with a lot of these elements from frame 1, but this single 35-second shot does more to illustrate Cuarón's genius than any other.
What is that? Do not give him one again. Hey, Neville, try an elephant.
Now, aside from being just generally fucking awesome, look at all of the insanely creative things Cuarón is doing here. Let's take a look at the content of the scene for starters. What are we being shown? What does it add to the story? To be honest, nothing really. It's just a bunch of teenage friends hanging out doing dumb shit. And you know what? This is the most that these characters have felt like real kids since the start of this series. This is what 13-year-olds mucking around looks like. It feels real, it feels relatable. Just look at how goofy they're being, look at how they're lounging around, look at what they're wearing. I think costuming is one of Cuarón's best evolutions within the series. The Columbus movies had these super strict costuming guidelines where the characters always looked like they were set for a promo shoot for the school uniform catalogue. Cuarón decided to bail on that and let the kids dress themselves.
Pero que no hay un solo niño que use el uniforme de la misma manera que el otro niño.
Shirts aren't tucked, ties look terrible, some have cloaks, some don't, hair is just generally a mess all round. It's a subtle change, but it works wonders for grounding Azkaban further into our own world. Also, just a shout out to whoever chose Hermione's iconic pink hoodie, because wapow, 10 points to Gryffindor.
That felt good.
Not good. Brilliant.
Jumping back to our scene, there's something else in the content before I start going into the form, which I know is what you're all hanging out for, so just bear with me for a second. Think about this. Did Philosopher's Stone or Chamber of Secrets have scenes like this? Scenes that weren't about introducing something or developing someone or discovering somewhere? Nope. This little sequence wasn't even in the original script, meaning Cuarón went out of his way to add this fun detour where we get to just experience the magic of boys being boys. That's honestly so freaking cool. I mean, you're the man, Alfonso. You're the man. But yeah, that's all just inner world detail. That's story. Let's look at how he's telling it. You've probably noticed by now, but this scene is done entirely in one shot with a floating camera that moves from subject to subject. This technique is part of what makes Azkaban, and by extension Cuarón's style, so iconic. His camera is curious and alive, and it's able to move freely and investigate a scene in dynamic ways that aren't afforded by the conventional studio approach that was used in the Columbus movies. The relative lack of edits throughout Azkaban's runtime creates a far more immersive experience for us as the viewer. Where most directors would cut between a character and the thing that they're looking at, Cuarón will pan or tilt or dolly or track. Regardless of how natural it feels for us as viewers, our brain registers a cut with far less fluidity than a seamless camera move. movement. After all, our eyes don't edit, so a camera that moves around freely works in the same way that our eyes do. Cuarón essentially harnesses the magic of the camera, and herein lies the most brilliant part of Azkaban's storytelling. The form reflects the fantasy. What I mean by this is that Cuarón has essentially made a film about magic that feels like magic. The one kick we've been getting consistently from these movies is seeing the impossible, but Cuarón upped the ante here and made a movie that moment after moment leaves you with your mouth hanging open saying, how? Every single scene features at least half a dozen creative kicks that elevate what could have been just a good, well-made scene into an incredibly inventive and exciting one. Cuarón seems to seek out the craziest way to do everything while optimizing every moment for the most precise storytelling he can, so that we're sitting here saying, wait, how did that work? While we're also having our attention drawn to a number of the movie's themes through the use of cinematic patterns or motifs. One of my favourite motifs in the movie is the way Cuarón continuously passes the camera through solid objects like glass or mirrors to link the environments on either side and use the contrast between them to tell us something. This one here, from the second shot no less, takes us from the exterior of number 4 Privet Drive through the window and into Harry's bedroom, physically showing Harry's separation from the outside world. There's the added genius here of the window pane silhouette that casts a cage-like shadow onto the wall, re-establishing the physical and emotional claustrophobia of Harry's life with the Dursleys. There's another shot like this just a few scenes later at the Leaky Cauldron that separates the Muggle world from the Wizarding one while still showing that they are intrinsically linked. And obviously there's the movie's most iconic shot in which the camera goes through a goddamn mirror, and I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea exactly what Cuarón is suggesting by this, but wow, how on earth did he think of that, and goddamn it, why has he gotta do it twice? What I'm saying here is that Cuarón establishes a consistent language that he uses throughout the film, and this language elevates the storytelling in a way that we subconsciously begin to process the movie differently. Motifs communicate thematic ideas, and these ideas are repeated in patterns that make us overtly aware of their existence without characters needing to explicitly state, oh, Harry is feeling lonely, or oh, Harry is different, or whatever it might be. Cuarón is telling a story that's there in the script for sure, but he's layering the information we receive visually to guide us to a deeper understanding of what we're experiencing. Just take the brilliant Leaky Cauldron long take for instance, in which Cuarón deploys a near 2-minute shot in which Mr. Weasley pulls Harry aside to explain the danger he's in regarding Sirius Black. Not only do they speak in the shadows, separated from friends and family and the vibrant energy they create, but Cuarón keeps the poster of Black present in the foreground of the shot before staging Harry and Mr. Weasley either side of it when the conversation turns explicitly to Black. It's not super flashy or anything, but it deepens our understanding of their conversation with visual cues that increase our intake of information. This is just good cinematic storytelling. Could I process any of the complexity of this movie's craftsmanship as a 9-year-old kid? No way. But even then, without the cinematic literacy I have today, I knew that this movie was different. I can pretty confidently say that The Prisoner of Azkaban was the first time I experienced the satisfaction of complex cinematic storytelling, and the impact it had on the kind of stories I was interested in going forward is undeniable. I don't have the time or the structure to go through every little thing I love about this movie, so all I ask is that you go back and watch it with all this in mind. Pay attention to how each scene is being shown to you and how the information you're absorbing is aiding how you process that scene. Pay attention to Cuarón's cinematic sorcery because it is truly a gift. I mean, how did he do this shot? How is this shot done? How did he do this? How did he do all of this? Honestly, I could just sit here forever and gush about every shot, every sound, every cut, every transition, every single detail. I could rave about how the camera tracks and twists and warps and floats in ways I've never seen before. I could lose my mind over how it does all this in ways that expand my perception of the characters and story. This movie has so much going on in every frame at any one time that I'm still noticing insane new details 14 years later, and that is utterly incredible. I love a good story, but what I love more than a good story is good storytelling, and this is the movie that made me fall in love with that. Storytelling is a beautiful, complex, fascinating thing, and The Prisoner of Azkaban opened a door for me into that dimension, and I've never left since. So, I guess we should find out what I'm talking about next then. Really? Hasn't everyone done a video on this? There can't be anything left to say at all, right? Oh well. I guess it's my turn now. Alright guys, so first of all I just want to thank you for checking out the first episode of I Love. I'm so excited to finally have this series out there, to finally have this whole thing underway, and I'm really excited to see where it goes in the future, considering this video really only is a small taste of what I think this show is going to become. It's going to get crazier, it's going to get sharper, it's going to get smarter, and it's going to get funnier, and hopefully you guys are going to dig what I have in store. Be sure to subscribe to this channel to make sure you don't miss any of it. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at
Loverboy Media.
And if you're a big fan of this channel and want to help support what we do here, you can pledge to us on Patreon. Doing so will unlock a bunch of cool rewards, including early access to the I Love videos, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you guys when I talk about The Dark Knight.